Good evening, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We're going to give folks just a couple more minutes to kind of file in, and we'll get started soon. But thank you all so much for being here tonight. All right, it looks like as folks start to come in, we're going to take just a couple more minutes to let some more people join the webinar, and then we'll get started. Thank you all for your patience in the waiting room today. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. For those of you that are just joining us, we're going to give people about one more minute to file in, and we thank you for your patience in the waiting room today as we worked out some tech issues. I just want to confirm, does anybody hear an echo with my audio? If you do, can you type it in the Q&A box for me? If not, let me know in the Q&A box as well. Just want to make sure you can all hear clearly. Okay, great. Looks like there's no echo. If you are getting an echo, try exiting the Zoom and coming back in. Thank you all so much. Alrighty, it looks like we're just about ready to get started. So, thank you all again for being here, and welcome to another session of our Ag-Cademy. Tonight, we will specifically be looking at the topic of animal husbandry with our presenter for this evening, Dr. Kamara Louisy. Before we get started, there are a few Zoom features I would like to point out. First, if you look at the chat box on your toolbar, we will post any relevant information and links throughout the program. This is also the place for tonight. We will have the Q&A box open as well as the chat box. When Dr. Kamara is ready for questions at the end of the program, the chat box will then be opened, and you may submit your questions in the chat box then so that she can hear it and answer them as they're coming in. If you have any other questions, any tech issues, anything that I might be able to answer, feel free to throw them in the Q&A box. You can also put your questions in the Q&A box to reference later. But Dr. Kamara will be running the Q&A from the chat box at the end of the program when the time comes. We'll give you another reminder, and I'll also type it in the chat a little bit later. But again, the Q&A box is there for your disposal. Only myself and Dr. Kamara Louisy will see it. So if you have any questions or anything that I can help you with, throw it in there. Finally, this program includes closed captioning, which you can turn on and off by clicking the closed caption or CC icon. If you're using a tablet or smartphone, you may need to turn it on in your Zoom settings. It is now my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Dr. Kamara Louisy. Dr. Louisy resides in Nevis, where she is currently a lecturer at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College in St. Kitts. She holds a BA in history from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus, along with DVM from St. Matthew's School of Veterinary Medicine, Grand Cayman. A former livestock extension officer with the Nevis Island Administration's Agricultural Department, Dr. Louisy also has experience as a graduate teacher at the Charlestown Secondary School, where she's responsible for the Agriculture Science Department, as well as teaching A-level communications and Caribbean studies. As a livestock extension officer, her role was multifaceted. She provided technical support to livestock farmers, along with procuring funding for various projects. Having been responsible for project applications for farming groups, Dr. Louisy also assisted with business plans as well as guidance for livestock business ventures. Dr. Louisy is also the liaison officer for Ross School of Veterinary Medicine Bovine Club. And on occasion, she supports health teams when officers are not available. Along with assimilating relevant information from farmers, she records livestock production numbers, and facilitates workshops and educates farmers. She has harnessed her skills so that the farmers can maximize opportunities and have a better idea of animal husbandry best practices. She also provides stray animal control and support. It is my pleasure to welcome tonight Dr. Kamara Louisy.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here once again. My topic for Helen's Daughters is usually in agribusiness, but this time around, I have been asked to give some information about animal husbandry because while there has been a wholesale focus on crops and agriculture processing, there are persons now who are gaining more interest in farming, livestock, whether it's poultry, sheep, goat, cattle, pigs, rabbits, you name it. Okay, so there's a whole plethora of things or animals that you can work with on a small scale basis. The most important thing that I tell persons is that when you're going into livestock farming, it's different from when you're going into crop farming, right? In terms of what you're going to need structurally, the information, the research, but you can do both. Actually, you can have animals and you can still have your crop farms. And in an instance like this, we call it a mixed farm system where each one feeds off of the other. So from the feedback that I've gotten previously, most persons who have participated in Helen's Daughters, either in the agro-processing aspect or even the crop extension or the crop aspect, are now looking to further develop their animal husbandry information or practices. Specifically, the main interest is in poultry, whether it's layers or broilers. Layers are the birds that lay eggs. Broilers are the birds that are slaughtered for sale for their meat. And pigs, sheep, and goat, and rabbits predominantly. Not too many people are into or want to tackle raising cattle right about now, and that is understandable because they're big animals and the needs are a little bit more detailed even on a small scale. All right, so we're going to jump right into our PowerPoint presentation right now. And hopefully, at the end, I would have given you at least enough information that it's a start so that you can continue your research. And as is the practice, after every session, Helen's Daughters can provide you with the contact information from me, just in case you want more information or access to more resources. All right, so let's get into it. Hold on. Next. All right. Okay. first, these are the topics that we are going to be looking at this evening. Now, it's a lot of information in a short space of time. So, number one, I hope I don't bore you. I don't like boring people. I prefer one-on-one sessions, but when we come to the question and answer section, we'll try to keep it as organic as possible with discussions and questions. All right. So first of all, we're going to be looking at the definition of animal husbandry, then a brief history of animal husbandry. Then the main focus of this particular session will be the following: best practices for animal care and management, climate smart approaches to small scale livestock production, the importance of proper nutrition and breeding in small scale livestock production, importance of and the sustainable livestock practices for food security and farm resilience. All right, so when you hear the term animal husbandry, the term husbandry in and of itself is kind of an antiquated, outdated term. But even though it is an outdated term, it is still relevant to a lot of modern practices that we do today. Okay, so animal husbandry basically is the branch of agriculture focused on breeding, raising, and caring for domesticated animals for human benefit. It covers everything from feeding and shelter to selective breeding and disease prevention, applied across cattle, poultry, fish, insects, and other livestock. While the term sounds old-fashioned, it describes a practice as old as civilization itself and as modern as sensor-equipped dairy farms. All right. Now, in the list of animals that you see me listing now, you would see me mention cattle, poultry. Fish is also included. All right. So there are persons who have small scale fish farms where they grow things like tilapia predominantly because they're very easy to grow on a small scale. And then in the insect section, we usually talk about apiary or apiculture, which is bees. All right. And then other livestock. So that's what we mean by fish and insects, predominantly on small scale production. So history of animal husbandry. It dates back to over 10,000 years and has evolved from early domestication to modern intensive livestock farming. So previously, our societies were hunter-gatherers. And during the on the hunting and gathering phases, the first animals that began to be domesticated were actually dogs, right? So in every civilization, whether you're in Europe or Africa, Asia, or the Americas, each civilization had a form of domestication occurring around the same time because hunting and gathering was predominantly based on the environment at the time and the conditions at the time. However, as persons started to become stationary and registered or realized that they can plant seeds in a certain area that they felt safe, then they started, instead of going out to hunt, they started taking the offspring sometimes of the animals that they hunted and raising them from small. Okay, it's like, for example, you are out in the wild and you're hunting buffalo. Okay, and you hunt the buffalo and the buffalo has an offspring. After you've taken down the parent and you've utilized the parts of the parent, you now have a baby buffalo in your present. You register that with this baby buffalo. If it's a female, if you have a male and it becomes pregnant, you can get milk from it. Okay, so it's not just the meat, but you can also use it to work also, to till the fields, etc. So when we got into what we call the agricultural phase of history, where we have further domestication of animals from dogs, sheep, goat, pigs coming down the line, then is where our civilization started building up on each other. So the domestication of animals as well as stationary crop farming was the beginning part of what we know as agriculture today. All right, it has been different for different parts of the world. But even though it has been different, there's almost how should I say, an innate similarity across borders or across or around the world. So here on this side here, this is just a picture showing you, this is some carvings from Egypt that show farmers herding cattle. So even before Egyptian times and so on, and even in caves and so on within Europe, Africa, even here in the West Indies and the Americas, you will find drawings and carvings and so on of animals that resemble what we know today modernly as sheep, goat, cattle, etc. Okay, so even though these things are happening in different parts of the world, it's actually happening around the same time of development. So today now, animal husbandry encompasses intensive and extensive farming systems adapted to land availability. Land availability is actually one of the biggest hurdles that you will face when you're doing any kind of agricultural practice, whether it's crops, whether it's livestock, whether it's apiary, even fish. Okay? In developed regions, high density feedlots and broiler houses are common. Okay, so here in the Caribbean, we are more organic in our practices. Even if someone is doing livestock production on a large scale, it is still considered small in comparison to what we call industrialized agriculture that occurs in places like the United States and Canada and Europe, where they have acres, hundreds and hundreds of acres dedicated to poultry birds or cattle or pigs or sheep and goat. Okay, so even if you know a farmer that has a poultry farm, and for us it's kind of established or bougie, they might have the cages and the feeders and the waterers and so on. In comparison to industrialized agricultural practices, what we do here in the Caribbean is still considered small scale. It might be enough to feed ourselves in terms of individual islands, or even you might be able to produce enough to export, right? But in comparison, the numbers cannot compare. Whereas for example, one of our poultry farmers here, his maximum number of birds is 120. He does not go over that. Okay. For us here in Nevis, that's a large scale poultry production. However, as compared to an American or European poultry production where they have thousands of birds, that 120 birds is just a drop in the bucket. Okay, so modern practices integrate genetics, veterinary science, and technology to improve efficiency, animal welfare, and sustainability. However, large-scale animal agriculture also contributes, and this is very important to note, because while we do need agriculture and while we do need farmers, large scale or what we call industrialized agriculture is actually doing a great harm to the environment and to the earth, predominantly with the methane production of cattle for high scale cattle production, and also with the loss of environments that are being taken up for these large scale industrial farms, as well as improper waste disposal. Okay, and all of these things combine together to contribute to one of the main issues that we have today, which is climate change. And that is one of the issues that I will be addressing in terms of animal husbandry and how we can mitigate those changes that we are experiencing. All right, so let's get into it now. The first topic, best practices for animal care and management. Effective animal care and management in a small-scale farming combines species selection, infrastructure planning, health and welfare protocols, and sustainable practices to ensure productivity, animal well-being, and environmental responsibility. Now, within the field of animal care, we have what is called the 5 Ws. that we have to ensure the animals receive when we have them in our care, right? So we are looking at shelter, nutrition, health, and those are the three main things, and but to that we also add behavior and record keeping. Okay. Behavior is very important. A lot of persons don't pay attention to it because you will see if you grow up in a farming environment, for example, here in Nevis, where we have large herds of animals, sheep and goat roaming, and their behavior, their owners know their behavior in terms of when to let them out, when they come back in, and different types of behaviors that they know. The animals know their owners' voices, etc. So these are things that are also incorporated into animal husbandry practices, because just like your children, you want your animals to listen to you. Okay. I have a farmer and he's very strange in this way. He babies his animals, sheep and goat. He actually takes them to be slaughtered, but he does not name them and he does not eat any animals that come from his flock because he's a little bit too attached or close to them. Okay, so you can have animals, you can have livestock, you can have them for production purposes, or you can have them as pets. Okay, there are persons who have a sheep, one little sheep or one little goat that they have tied in the yard or roaming in the yard, which is their little pet. So most of the time, sometimes these are animals that end up having to be bottle fed because they lost their mother, the mother rejected them, or something happened. And so the persons who are raising them find it very difficult to, raise them for slaughter. So they have them as pets. Similarly with rabbits. Okay, some persons raise rabbits for meat and some have them as pets. Similarly with pigs. I have yet to meet or find a person who has a cow in the Caribbean as a pet, but I'm sure there's somebody out there somewhere with a cow as a pet. But most of the times when persons have cattle, they are using them for breeding or meat or milk purposes. All right, so choose the right livestock for your system. So when you are considering getting into livestock farming, first of all, you need to look at yourself and look at what you are capable of. What can you manage on a daily basis in terms of taking care of animals? Because taking care of animals is the equivalent of taking care of a child. Okay, you have to have a routine and you have to follow certain practices. You have to maintain the nutrition and stuff like that. And sometimes your schedule has to be dictated by what they do. Okay, their schedule cannot be dictated by what you do, or else you will lose your animals accordingly. Right? So first of all, choose the right livestock for your system. So match species to your space, resources, and market needs. And this last point here is very important in terms of market needs. Okay, whereas in persons want to pursue livestock farming for a business, as a form of a business, okay, but the animals that they want to invest in, there's not a market for it. Perfect example, and this is a difference between islands. Okay, so for example, here in St. Kitts and Nevis, rabbit. Okay, some of the hotels serve rabbit maybe once a week or maybe seasonally. Okay, so if you are intending to raise rabbits for the purpose of selling them for meat, you have to investigate and find out who can I sell this product to when I get into production mode. Because you don't want it to be a case where you have rabbits, because remember, they reproduce very quickly, right? So when the rabbits are reproducing very quickly, you want to ensure that you have a place, a secure market for them, so that you can recoup those funds that you have been putting back into them and make some sort of profit off of it. If you don't have the market for it, then it is suggested that you don't pursue rabbits as an animal to use for that business plan. You might more be successful with sheep or goat because mutton is always high in demand, at least here in the Federation. Other islands now, such as Dominica, St. Lucia, more the Windward Islands and so on, there's a ready market. There's a ready market for rabbits on a daily basis. Okay. Another animal I could use as an example would be ducks. Okay, ducks fall under poultry. So duck meat is very popular with the Asian restaurants and so on. And we have Asian restaurants popping up left, right, and center. So if you register that we have Asian restaurants popping up left, right, and center, and you find out that, oh, they're importing their duck, and you say, okay, well, I can produce ducks here and sell it to them. You get that niche, you secure that niche in that particular market space. Okay, so it's very important not just looking at the space, the physical space that you have, right? And the resources in terms of infrastructure, finances, water, feed, medical, all those things. But you also need to know that when you're going into this as a business practice, you have to make sure that you have a secure market for the sale of your eggs, your chicken, your mutton, your rabbit, or your pork, or whatever it is. Okay, right. So let's look at some examples here in terms of the livestock. So chickens. Chickens are very low maintenance. Okay. And you can have chickens in your backyard. Right? You can recycle boxes, old containers, and so on to use for them to lay in. You can go, a good idea if you're interested in chicken farming or having chickens and you want to get like housing for them or whatever, you can go on Pinterest. Pinterest has a lot of ideas, very simple, very effective, cost effective, where you can use things that you have on hand already, like old tires, old wire, pieces of board, pallets, and all those kinds of stuff to make a nice little safe setup for the chickens. Okay, and chickens are very good for beginners and for those persons who have children who might be interested in animal care and so on. Chickens are a great livestock animal to start with in terms of incorporating and teaching children responsibility, etc. Right? Another one would be goats. Okay, goats are very easy to manage and they're very adaptable. And not only can you get meat from goats, but you can get milk and you can get the skin. Okay. We have alpine goats. So different breeds of goats are for specific different things. So we have mixed breed goats. So these goats are like the Dorper, where you can get milk and meat from them, and then the alpine, where you can just get predominantly milk. Right? And sheep fall into the same category as goats, very simple, not so much great milk producers, but you can get wool and they're good for pasture management. What do I mean by pasture management? It means that if you have an area that you need to control the growth of the forage or the grass or whatever it is in the area, just put some sheep in there and it'll help keep down the growth and manage that area. And it's like a combination of things because the droppings now end up fertilizing that area. So you get a nice, fertilized area and it's kind of symbiotic. Pigs are very good in terms of getting your money back for your production costs very quickly because pigs grow very quickly and you can get your money back once you manage your nutrition properly. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about that further down the line. And then once again, rabbits, very quick breeding and minimal space. Okay, so you can have livestock and you can be like, okay, I'm going to have 1 or 2 pigs over here, maybe a male and a female of a specific breed. I'm going to use them just for breeding. I'm not going to use them for pork. Okay. And then in another section of your yard, you can have chickens. Okay. And you can get eggs from them. And if your chicken, even if it's a layer and it's past its laying stage, so you realize this bird is not laying as many eggs as it used to, you turn it into a broiler. Okay. There's your chicken dinner. Okay. So you can be very creative and gain a lot from animal production, but you have to do the research first and make sure that you are prepared, you have the space, you have the resources, and you have the market once you're attacking it as a business. All right, so assess and plan infrastructure. So infrastructure is needed. You have these animals, every single animal has different requirements. Okay. So first of all, you need to measure land, water, fencing, and feed storage and typical space needs. So here on this PowerPoint, I have listed out examples of what is expected for each animal. So 1 acre per cow, or 0.2 acres per sheep or goat, 500 square feet per 12 chickens, 300 square feet per 2 pigs. And always ensure, it's very important, that you have adequate shelter, bedding, and ventilation, and comply with local zoning and animal density regulations. What does this mean? The last part there means. It means that every island has stipulations of how many animals you are permitted on private property before you are considered a farm. And then you have to now move that from out of a residential area and find another area or an agricultural area to have that production going on. Okay. So for example, here in the Federation, for sheep and goat, for example, anything over 5 sheep or goat is considered overproduction, and you need to have a pen space for them and not have them near a residential area in an area. Do we follow those regulations? No, we don't. Okay. And this is something that is common throughout the islands. The regulations are there, but you will drive around and you will see somebody have a sheep pen in the backyard, a pig pen in the backyard, and it's between them and another house and so on. Sometimes, depending, there are legal issues that can arise from those kind of arrangements, which unfortunately for me, I have had to, go in and kind of quell, because you don't want to have rearing pigs right in a residential area because they're smelly. I mean, raising animals, regardless of the breed, they're going to be smelly. The animals that you could get away with doing that predominantly in reasonable numbers would be rabbits and poultry. Okay, because you can build up the pens and the cages in such a way that it's not impeding or contributing to pollution and smells and so on. But definitely when it comes to pigs, sheep and goats and cattle and so on, and those larger animals, anything over a particular number, an agricultural extension officer will tell you you need to get a piece of land that is in an agricultural area and put your pen there so you have your animals there. So you might have to travel a bit. Okay, so you might definitely have to travel a bit. But right now we're just talking about things that you can do in the space that you have at this point in time. Okay, if you do have access to agricultural lands outside of your own personal property where you have your house on, that you can put a proper pen that is not going to impede or cause environmental problems with smell, etc., then that is perfect. Then you could go as big as you want, as long as you have the resources and the market for what you're producing. Okay, but if you are intending to start out small with the intention of going bigger, Consult with your agriculture department, specifically your livestock extension officers, because that's part of their job and their responsibility to make sure that you get the support and the advice that you need in order to continue producing and assist you with maybe locating lands, sorting out leases, making sure you're up to code, that your practice or whatever it is not impeding on the environment that you have set up, whether it's in your personal property, backyard, or yard space, or on agricultural land that you have access to. All right, so prioritize health and welfare. No, this is a big problem that I have faced in my practice, because persons say, okay, yeah, I want some chickens to lay eggs. And they get the chickens and they bring them in the yard, and there's no housing, there's no shelter, and they don't assess the health of the birds. Okay? The healthier your birds are, the healthier any of your animals are, the more they are going to produce. Okay? So that is top priority. Not only that, but we also have to be aware of something called zoonosis. What is zoonosis? Zoonosis is the ability of pathogens, whether it's bacteria, fungi, viruses, etc., to pass from animals to human beings. Okay, so when we get into biosecurity with a little bit more detail, I'm going to give you examples of how you can keep your environment and your animals clean so that you don't cross-contaminate from animal to human beings. All right, so let's look at our scheme here. First thing, implement. Implement routine health checks, balanced feeding, and clean living conditions. These are key practices. Provide fresh water daily and clean feeders. Unfortunately, and this is why I say, make sure you have a realistic expectation of what you're going to do. Because some persons, I have been to farms where the water containers are, I don't even know how to describe them. But they look like creatures could be coming from out of the water containers. The water is not clean, the water is not clear, the containers are dirty, there's mold, there's slime, and all these things there. And if the animals are drinking from the source, automatically it means that there's potentially harmful bacteria in there that can get into the animals. It can affect their health. And even if it does not affect their health immediately, if these animals are going to be used for consumption, then it's going to be passed into our systems when they're slaughtered and we are consuming them. Okay, so it's very important, provide fresh water daily and clean feeders. And then monitor for signs of illness and treat promptly, meaning that you have to be so aware of your animals and know them so well that you can see or you notice early on when something is problematic for your animals. Okay, so the closer relationship you have with your animals, that you can monitor them, then the better it is for you. All right, 1 second, please. I have a little disturbance. All right, continuing. So maintain biosecurity to prevent disease spread. Biosecurity is just a fancy term to mean health protocols or hygienic protocols. Okay, so an example would be a foot bath. So some poultry farmers, even if they don't have a large number of pigs, at the entrance, there's a one-way through their facility or their little setup. So as you come to the doorway, there's a foot bath, and the foot bath has in either a bleach solution or what we call a chlorhexidine solution. These two are used to sanitize the feet. Okay, so that the farmer is not bringing outside pathogens into the pig pen. And then at the end or the exit, because it's one way, they will wash their feet again in another foot bath. And once they come out of that, take off their shoes or their footwear and put them on, and they switch over into another pair of shoes. That is to prevent pathogens from entering from outside in and pathogens from coming inside out. Okay. Other farms would have maybe a spray bottle with another bleach solution in the spray bottle, or chlorhexidine solution. And if they're using tools and equipment, they would spray down these things as they're using them, before and after, to ensure that whatever pathogens might have gotten on those tools or equipment, that they are now clean and sanitized. Some persons go as far as to sterilize stuff that they use on a regular basis. Okay, so these are things that you have to look into in order to maintain the health, not just for your animals, but for you personally as well. Okay, and then use humane handling and restraint techniques. What do I mean by this? Too many times we have, how should I put it? Okay, let me use this example. So there's a lady by the name of Temple Grandin. Okay, she is a very renowned animal behaviorist. And she did research that showed that the better you treat your animals, the healthier that they are, the better meat quality that they have, and the more they produce. Okay, so she came up with the idea of low stress handling of animals, so that you don't stress them out even before they are going to slaughter. You maintain and you try to keep them as calm as possible, because stress produces hormones, cortisol, increase in testosterone, and all these things which can affect meat quality. Okay, so I'm sure some of you might have, come across persons maybe playing music for their cattle, playing music in the barn, singing to the chickens, massaging pigs, all of these things. Now, I'm not saying you have to do all of those things. Okay, I'm not saying you have to do all of those things, because some people take it a little bit too far, right? But these are just things that help to calm the animal down so that they are more relaxed and comfortable to produce what they have to produce. Studies have shown, for example, in dairy cattle, that if you play music, calming music, classical music in the barns and so on, they produce more milk. Okay, so these are things that have been researched. And so you have to know yourself, you have to know your personality and what you can handle. Okay, so if you know that you can't handle chickens squawking in your ear early in the morning at 4 o'clock in your yard and so on, because it disturbs your sleep and whatever it is, don't get chickens. Okay, because then you're going to be irritable and so on. And animals, unfortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, they feed off of energy from other animals and human beings as well. Okay, so if you're stressed out and irritated, you're going to stress out and irritate your animals as well. Okay, and this is going to cause somewhere down the line a decrease in production, or cause health problems and stress out to animals. We know as human beings, when we are stressed out, we are prone to get ill easier. Same way with animals. Hold on. Next. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. It's not cooperating. Okay. All right. So adopt sustainable management practices. What do we mean by sustainable management practices? If you are, how should I say, if you have been exposed to what I call old time or old school agricultural practices, okay, where you just let your animals go wherever they want and do whatever they want and come back wherever they feel like, and you just throw down some feed and put some water in a container and say, okay, then whatever happened to them, and when you feel like it, you just go and take up one or two and take it to the abattoir or sell to somebody or whatever it is. That is not sustainable. Okay. It's not sustainable for the environment. It's not sustainable for you. It's not sustainable for the animals. Okay. Let me give an example now that we are in, we are experiencing a severe drought. Okay. And some of the farmers here in the Federation have had to learn the lesson the hard way that you cannot let your animals roam for extended periods of time and go places that you don't know where they're going. Okay? Animals are now suffering from heat stroke, dehydration, dog attacks, and theft. The dog attacks and theft, actually, those are the two most common issues outside of droughts, what we are going through right now. Okay? So when you reduce the roaming of sheep and goat and cattle in particular, but persons do have pigs that roam. Okay, when you do reduce the roaming of those animals now, and you have a set system in place, you can manage them, you can keep them safe, you can manage their hydration, you can manage their nutrition, and you can keep yourself out of court because your animals won't end up in places where they should not be, like private property. Okay, and unfortunately, fortunately, some islands are better with their animal control than others. Right now in the Federation, we have a huge problem with farmers monitoring and managing their herds. I call them expensive pets. Why I call them expensive pets? Because some of these farmers have over 100 head of sheep, 100 head of goats, pigs that roam. Okay. And when they go and they do all these damages and so on and thing, there are laws in place that if we find out that your animals are actually your animals, you have to compensate damages to the property owner. And it's amazing and it's surprising that many times these animals end up with no owner when persons find out that they've gone and done damage. And so you end up with police getting involved and then courts and lawyers and a whole bunch of stuff, and you put yourself in problems that you don't need to be in because you're not doing best practices. Okay, so one of the practices that I encourage is what we call semi-intensive farming. Okay, so if you are going to have your animals, but you're going to have them in a set place where they're going to be contained and they can roam from one area in that set place to the next place, but they're not going to need to roam far because you're already providing food for them in that area. And how do you provide food for them in that area? You do that by having something called a forage bank. Okay, and a forage bank is just a fancy term for an area somewhere in the corner of your yard or in a pasture that you have wild grasses, wild tamarind, legumes, and so on growing that you can go and collect and feed to your animals. Okay, and that also helps to mitigate the cost of feed too, because feed is increasing. Everything is getting expensive. So we have to become more creative now in terms of what we are going to be feeding our animals. And natural is always the best, because sometimes when you overfeed the animals grains, these grains are high in carbohydrates and sugars, and they cause issues like bloat. Or when you do take your animal to be slaughtered, the meat is not of high quality because it's too much fat and not enough meat or muscle tissue there. And this is where and why many farmers say they don't like to take their animals to the abattoir to slaughter, because they don't give them the value of the animal. And that is not the case. The case is that when the animal is finally slaughtered, when we get the dead weight, most of it is fat and not muscle. And people are paying for muscle meat and not fatty tissue. Okay, so these are just some examples of sustainable practices such as rotational grazing, integrated pest management, manure recycling, and climate adapted breeds. Okay. Most people here should be familiar with manure recycling. Basically, you have animals, they drop their feces, you scoop it up, a crop farmer comes, collect it, and they use it for their farm. Okay, so if you are already into crop farming and you decide that you want 1 or 2 sheep or goat for this very reason, there's nothing wrong with that. There are actually persons who do that, and they're crop farmer relationship with livestock farmers, so that when they are finished their harvest, all the trash, what we call the trash, the bush and everything else, they give them to the livestock farmer, and the livestock farmer uses that as feed. Okay, and the livestock farmer can either use it in compost, or they can make what we call a silage. And silage is just the chopped up trash mixed with molasses and water, and you leave it there to ferment for a period of time, and you can use that to add to your grass or your wild tamarind and your other cuttings that you would give to your animals. And it is very important, extremely important, that whatever breed of animal you get is sustainable for the area or the environment that you're in. Okay, so if you are going to go and you say, I want sheep, you're not going to get a woolly sheep with a very thick coat that persons predominantly use to get wool from, because in our environment down here, especially with the increase in the temperatures, those animals are going to fall down dead in the field or dead in your yard. Okay, so these are things that you have to ensure that you have. And in terms of pest management, the predominant pests that we have for livestock are mites, fleas, ticks, and lice. Those are the 4 external parasites, okay, or external pests. We also have worms, but when I come to a little further down, I'm going to talk about worming and why deworming is very important. All right, next. All right. Use systems for animal care management. So turn daily chores into a structured system. So if you are deciding that you are going to go into livestock production, okay, a lot of the tasks might seem tedious. Well, not might, they are tedious, and you're going to have to do them on a daily basis. Morning, sometimes noon, night, definitely. Okay, so checklist for feeding, watering, health checks, and breeding. Okay, documentation for traceability, compliance, and follow-up, and then scheduling to ensure consistent care and reduce reliance on memory. Okay, all of this to say, documentation and record keeping is very extremely important, whether it's small scale or large scale farming for livestock. Documentation, record keeping is key in ensuring that not only are you up to date with whatever it is you're doing with your animals. So for example, if you say you're going to purchase pigs for breeding, okay? You're going to purchase pigs for breeding, and you're going to ensure that you know the signs to look for when the animals are in heat, number 1. And then when they have mated, you're going to mark down the date that they were mated. You're supposed to know the length of pregnancy in a pig, okay? The physical signs to look for to ensure or indicate that that pig is now pregnant. Okay, so you have an estimated timeline. Okay, look for the signs for when she's ready to whelp, meaning drop the piglets. All right, make sure that you have everything you need, medically speaking, so like iodine, things for her to make a nest, and all those other things, deworming and all those protocols that should take place during the pregnancy. So everything needs a record. Okay, so when was the breeding done? How long is the extent is the pregnancy? When was the last deworming done? When is the next deworming supposed to be due? When was the last inoculation? When is the next inoculation due? okay? Because this animal is pregnant, it's going to need a different diet now. So we are going to increase this kind of feed in the feed, etc. And all of these things have to be or should be documented in some way, shape, or form, as well as you having a strict schedule of feeding times, changing the water, and cleaning. And cleaning is very important, okay? Cleaning is one of the major problems that we have with livestock farmers, whether it's poultry, birds, sheep, goat, pigs, or whatever it is, and cleaning is essential. All right. I have had to clean out some pens or assist farmers clean out pens that have so much dung in them that they go down feet deep, like 3, 4, 5 feet deep of dung. Okay, to the point where sometimes we have to call in a small backhoe or something to come and take up all of that material to clean out the pens. Okay, and when you have dirty pens like that, it affects not only the environment because of the smell, okay, you also have to consider that, but also the health of the animals, especially their feet and their underbelly, okay? So you would have animals getting foot rot, abscesses, and different things that could be preventable if you keep your pen clean. All right. So also you also should have a cleaning schedule so that things don't get too bad to the point where an extension officer or somebody has to complain about smell and all those kind of things there, even if it's just 5 animals you have. Okay, so hygiene, cleaning is very essential for animals, and you should also have a schedule. If you operate on a schedule, you will be all right. Okay, record keeping is one of the major problems I have with persons who are doing animal husbandry, whether it's on a small scale or a large scale. Okay, I have had persons who have had animals all their life and they've been producing animals and taking them to the abattoir, etc. Okay, and these records are very important also if you intend to import things to get duties off for agricultural purposes. Okay, or if grants are available. Okay, the grant agencies need to see that you are responsible livestock owner, that you keep your records, that you're up to date and so on. And these are the things that are going to encourage them to want to give you that funding so that you could improve or upgrade your production and stuff like that. So documentation and record keeping and scheduling are very important. Okay, especially if they are not pets, then you have to have management practices. Okay, monitor and adapt. So because you have animals, you have to keep up on them constantly in terms of monitoring them to see where you're gaining and where you're losing, because we want more gains and we want less losses. Okay, there are things that are out of your control. Okay, there are going to be things that are out of your control, but the more things that you have in control, the better it is going to be for you to recover. For example, God forbid, knock on wood, that a hurricane passes. Okay, if you are regularly monitoring and keeping up to date and you're on your schedule and so on, and you've put things in place, so even if the hurricane takes out a number of your animals, it should not take you more than maybe 4 to 6 months max to start seeing your gains and returns again in terms of breeding and pregnancies and growing back your flock, etc. Okay, and it is very important to know the sensitivities of your animals. For example, birds and rabbits, they are very sensitive to temperature changes. Extreme cold and extreme heat, and you're going to lose your birds, you're going to lose your rabbits. Okay, sheep, goat, and cattle are a little bit more hardier and resistant to climate change. or changes in temperature, but birds and rabbits in particular, very, very sensitive. Okay, so let me give you an example. If there's a cold snap, okay, and the area that you have your birds housed in does not have an area that can keep them warm. So if you have a few birds and you know that December, Christmas season coming up and the place is going to get colder, some people get heating lamps that they put in the pens that they can hang up, okay, to help keep it a little bit warmer. Because when the place gets extremely cold, birds tend to huddle up together, okay, and they actually huddle up and kill or crush each other in that huddle, and you could lose birds that way. Similarly now, if you have birds without proper ventilation, without a way in which they can cool down, when the place gets too hot now, they overheat easily and they just drop down. Okay, they're not going to huddle like when it's in a cold snap, but they're going to spread out and you're going to just see them dropping down, boom, bam, bap, because they're suffering from heat stress. So you have to keep these things in mind. So even if it's small scale, you have to consider things like direction of the wind, the temperature changes during the different types of years, increased temperature changes, decreased temperature changes, keep abreast of the weather. Okay, so I encourage some of my farmers to get weather apps or to keep abreast of the weather so that they know how to prepare or ensure that their animals are safe in case there's any extreme changes in the weather, especially short term or short notice. Okay, but once we're dealing with weather, like I said, some things are out of your control. So if you know that cooler seasoning is coming up and we tend to have maybe some cold snaps, get 1 or 2 heating lamps, okay? Put them in place, turn them on at night, okay? Make sure that they're spaced out enough breeze is blowing through so that it doesn't overheat the pen or the chicken cage or the chicken coop, so that if there's a cold snap, even if you lose 1 or 2 birds, you're not going to lose like 10, 20, 30, 40 birds. Okay? A few losses are normal. It is expected. Regardless of what breed of animal you have, few losses are expected. You can have what we call an abortion storm, where, for example, a sheep or goat might have eaten something that did not agree with them and might have had a toxin in them and passed into their system, and they start just aborting their lambs and their kids. These things happen. Okay? Or somebody's dirty animal, you're trying to keep your animals clean, and they come in, but somebody else dirty animal come in with your pen, with your animals or whatever it is, and spread some kind of nastiness, and they just start to drop down or start to suffer from other ailments. So you have to make sure that you monitor your animals as closely as possible. You're supposed to know them as well as you know yourself. Maybe a little, maybe a bit, a little bit more, okay? Because some of these animals are that sensitive. All right, so climate smart livestock production integrates adaptation, mitigation, and productivity gains to help small-scale farmers cope with climate change while improving food security, livelihoods, and environmental sustainability. So let's look at it. Smallholder livestock keepers face these predominant problems here, okay, especially in the Caribbean. So this is why I listed them here. Heat stress from rising temperatures, and unfortunately, like I said, the region is in an extended drought. This is not dry season anymore. This is drought. Dry. Okay, and those livestock farmers who are faring better than others are those who put things in place previously after they realized that concurrently, year after year after year, the place was getting hotter. Okay? So they invested in water tanks. They invested in drip irrigation for their forage banks to ensure that the grasses and the legumes and so on that they're growing specifically for their animals are thriving so that they can feed their animals, so their animals don't have to roam at all or roam too far. Okay? Erratic rainfall and drought. So that is what we are in. We haven't reached the erratic rainfall part yet, because every time the rain shows up, it disappears. Okay, shifting disease patterns. So the first three are really connected. So heat stress, erratic rainfall and drought, and extreme weather events, we are experiencing those now on an annual basis. So you have to ensure that you have things in place that could mitigate the damage to your animals make it as minuscule as possible, so that when that has passed, you can recover as quickly as possible. Okay? Shift in disease patterns is also part of climate change, where we now have a prevalence of external and internal pests and parasites proliferating. And not only are they proliferating, but they are gaining resistance to the drugs that we typically use to control them. Okay? So in a lot of cases now, we're actually having to go back to our ancestors, our Amerindian and African ancestors, to get some of the things that they used to use to help now in modern times in terms of mitigating these disease patterns. Okay, so for example, neem oil. Okay, crop people usually use neem oil sprayed on the leaves of their plants and so on. It's supposed to be natural, organic and so on. And it has been shown to control ticks and lice, certain species, I should say, of ticks and lice here in the West Indies. Okay, so if you've ever seen a sheep, and we call it the brown dog tick, so it's just the regular gray tick that you see on the sheep and goats, sometimes on the dogs, okay? That neem oil can use to control that. Obviously, though, because it's not as potent as the chemicals, you have to know the right dosage and you will have to use it more frequently, okay? And or you can use a combination of neem oil, tea tree oil, I think it's cedar oil, as well as the chemicals, okay? And rotate them accordingly. So you're not going to use the same chemical over and over and over and over again, because that is what builds up resistance in the pests. Same thing for the dewormers also. Okay, so when you're doing with deworming, you have to have a deworming protocol. So going back to management, when I say you have to record, keep, and have schedules, you're supposed to have a deworming schedule also. And within that deworming schedule, you're supposed to be rotating dewormers so that the worms don't build up a resistance. Okay, because then you're going to just be spending money on chemicals and the pests will be taking over and your animals will be dying. Okay, and then we have resource depletion, which is something because of the drought that we are going through. We have a severe water depletion within the region. Okay, so for those farmers who registered a few years ago that they needed to get water tanks, irrigation systems, and all these kinds of things to make sure that their animals had fresh water, clean water, and at least green forage or feed, they are the ones who are faring better than those who were not prepared or chose not to prepare. So now they have to be driving for miles, maybe sometimes going up into the hills and so on, and cutting feed, or spending hundreds of dollars on the grain from the supply officer, animal supplier, whatever it is, and having to spend all that money. And then because the hotter the place is, the more energy the animals use up. Okay, so it means now that that food is not going into meat conversion, it is going into the animals actually just surviving. So they are not going to be gaining weight, and if they do gain weight, it's going to be more attributed to fat than muscle mass. which is what we want if we are going to be producing animals for production purposes. All right, so core climate smart strategies. So there are a few climate smart strategies that I've listed that if you want to further research, you can, at the end of the PowerPoint slide, I put some resources there, but I mean, Google is free, right? You can go in and there are very reliable sources that you can find. FAO, CARDI, University of the West Indies, ICA on their websites and so on. They have all sorts of information related to climate smart strategies in terms of livestock rearing and animal husbandry. Okay, right. So the first one, adaptive breeding and genetics. So breeding is very essential in terms of creating breeds that are more hardier for the environment and the changes that are occurring. Natural selection dictates that the animals who fare better in harsher conditions, when you breed them, then their offspring will fare better in the future with even harsher conditions. Okay? So while persons like purebred animals, okay, if you're looking for specific things like just maybe only milk production or maybe only meat production, okay? But the breeds that fare better within the region are actually those that are crossbred. Okay, so we crossbreeding for heat tolerance, parasite tolerance, drought resistance. Those are the animals that we want to breed with each other so that we have a stronger animal moving forward that can sustain and deal with the environmental changes and the climate changes better. Okay, and when they deal with them better, it's actually less work for you, especially in the future, and also it is less costly for you in the future. Okay, so precision breeding is used to improve feed efficiency and resilience. Then sustainable nutrition. So prioritize indigenous and locally available feed resources to reduce cost and environmental impact. So like I mentioned before, if you know a crop farmer and it's harvest time or they're harvesting something, just go over and tell them, hey, when you finish you're harvesting and you have the trash and the stalks or whatever it is, can I come and collect them for my animals? I don't know of a crop farmer that is going to say no unless they have animals of their own that they're going to use it for. Or if they're going to use it for compost to turn into fertilizer or whatever it is. And even then, sometimes it's a lot of trash. They could give away some. Okay, and then you can use it for your own purposes. You can make silage out of it. You can chop it up. You can bale them, put them in a bale similar to a hay bale and everything, dry them out and everything else, and use them and incorporate them into the feed. Okay, and it's cheaper. Okay, the more local bush, as we call it, that you use with your animals, the less it is on your pocket, because you don't have to be going and buying these big bags of grain and feed, etc., which are very costly. And sometimes, depending on supply, you might not have supply available. Okay. And for most of the animals that I listed before, they eat like, how should I say? They eat vegetables. They eat the trash. Okay? So if you know of somebody who sells a fruit or vegetable vendor, and you know that at the end of the week they have stuff left over that's going to end up spoiling, like pumpkin and watermelon and all these kind of things there, go and get them. Go and get them. You feed your pigs, you feed your chickens, you feed your rabbits, you feed your sheep, you feed your goat, you feed your cattle. Okay, easy peasy lemon squeezy like that. And you can just reciprocate and say, hey, I could bring some dung for you for your farm. Okay, so bartering, you know, manage it out. These are what our ancestors used to do, and these are things that can still work today, especially with the cost of living increasing, right? and you want the animals, yes, you want it as a business, you want production, but once again, we want minimal cost with high profit. And these are things that will bring you that high profit. You just have to be creative with your thinking. All right. Improve husbandry and shelter. So recycling, okay? You don't need to go and build this big fancy setup with brand new wire and board and galvanize and so on. Use what you have. Okay, go around, drive around to maybe the hardware stores and ask them for pieces of wood or board that they're not using, cuts and so on, old pallets, pieces of galvanized and stuff like that, and get creative. Old tires, all these things. And let me tell you something, Pinterest, if you go on Pinterest and you put in like, how do I make a chicken pen out of recycled goods or recycled stuff, you're going to see a whole lot of stuff come up. Right? Same thing for sheep and goat pens, pig pens, whatever it is, get a lot of inspiration from there. And you can get creative with it. Right? But when you're doing your shelter, you have to make sure you have shade, proper ventilation, and access to water. Okay, so you don't need to have a water or a pipe right next to your setup, but you can have a barrel, one of those plastic shipping barrels. Get a couple of those, fill them up with water. That's your water source right next to your thing. You just go in, dip out accordingly. Okay. I have a farmer who has a setup where the pig pen, the pig pen's floor is made out of pallets. So he's able to go underneath it. It's it's kind of slightly raised, so he's able to go under with a rake and rake out underneath. And then on the top, on the galvanized section, he got some, what you call it again? The trimming to put. And when the rain falls, it goes directly, runs straight down and goes directly into the water barrels that he has at the side, and he collects the water that way, and he uses that water for his pigs. Okay, very simple setup. He only has 6 pigs, but very simple setup. Okay, and then he has a little area where he has he grows corn and something else. So when he harvests that now, he just cuts up the trash and everything else, and he just throws it in the pen. Okay, boom bap, easy peasy like that. Some persons actually drive around the island to restaurants and hotels and collect the clippings and the cuttings from the restaurants, like the onion scraps, the fruits and vegetables and so on. The restaurants or the hotels have it there in a bucket. You go and collect it and you feed it to your pigs, sheep, goat, whatever it is. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. It does not have to cost you an arm and a leg to raise animals once you do it smartly. Okay, and you can do it smartly as well as being environmentally conscious at the same time. All right, so continuing. Waste management and resource. Waste management is a big problem in the region in terms of animal husbandry and how the waste is discarded. Okay, too many times where persons clean their pens or the environments where the animals are, they don't have proper drainage, number one. Sometimes drainage, especially if you're doing things on your own property and you have neighbors, this can affect your neighbors in terms of runoff, etc. Okay. Persons don't utilize the manure, so they just scrape up the manure and take it and dump it when they could just give a crop farmer. Okay, and establish maybe a bartering system that I mentioned before. Okay, so waste management is very important, and you can recycle it in such a way that it can be beneficial. For example, if you have poultry birds and they're laying eggs, okay, you can tell the persons that you're selling your eggs to, hey, when you use the eggs, save the eggshells and give them back to me. You're going to crush up those eggshells and you're going to incorporate them into the feed, and they're going to provide extra nutrients. Simple as that. You could do it your own self. Okay? right? So integration works, and if you have a forage bank that you're, growing feed for your animals and so on, you can also take that manure and spread it into the forage bank. This is going to help the forage bank flourish. Okay? Soil and pasture management. So, unfortunately, grazing animals, if you don't manage them properly, can overgraze an area. We don't want that happening. Okay, so rotational grazing is what is always recommended if you are going to have your animals roaming in a particular area. It is suggested that if you have enough space, that you cordon off an area and you keep them in that area for a specific period of time, and then you switch them over to another area. That way you don't deplete that entire area. And also you don't want your animals roaming too far from home, because once again, they can get hit by a car, they can be stolen, they can get attacked by dogs and all those things. So you want to keep your animals, especially the sheep, cattle, pigs, and goats, as close to home as possible so that you can manage them and monitor them. Okay? Diversification and risk management. So diversify species. What do I mean by that? It means that you don't have to focus on just one animal. Okay? You can focus on poultry, birds, and rabbits. Both of them are extremely small scale, low effort, low space, and have both of them. Okay? You can have goats and pigs. Okay? Mix it up a little bit. See what happens. It wouldn't hurt. All right? But only do what you can manage. Only work with what you can manage and what is innate to you. Do not do anything outside of what you think you are not capable of. Don't go and buy a bowl and bring it in your backyard and tie it up. That is not productive. That makes no sense. Okay, just have a bowl in your yard, eating down, and then moo, making noise and whatever it is. Okay, and so that's why two persons don't usually have cattle as small scale and more large scale, because they need more space, and they are larger animals, and they are strong animals, and they can also be a hazard to persons, because bulls can charge, cows can charge, etc. Right? It's easier to recover from a butt or kick from a sheep or a goat as opposed to a cow. Okay? Right. So know your limitations. All right. So let's look at nutrition. The importance of proper nutrition and breeding in small-scale livestock production. In small-scale livestock farming, proper animal nutrition and breeding practices are twins. It means one cannot exist without the other, okay? That determine productivity, profitability, and sustainability. Together, they ensure healthy animals, efficient resource use, and long-term herd improvement, okay? So basically, all this is saying is that nutrition is just as essential as the breeding. Okay, you can have a very strong and hardy breed, very drought resistant, pest resistant, etc. But if you are not giving it the diet that it needs to be productive and healthy, you're wasting your money. All right, so let's look at the role of proper nutrition. So the role of proper nutrition. Nutrition is the foundation of livestock performance. Feed can account for 60 to 70% of total production costs. So ask any farmer, small scale or large scale, feed is the greatest cost. Okay, so that's why previously I mentioned some of those sustainable ways in which you can get feed without breaking the bank. Okay, making it the largest expense and the most impactful factor for improving output. The role of breeding practices in terms of nutrition. Breeding directly shapes the genetic potential of the herd and influences traits like growth rate, milk yield, meat quality, and disease resistance. Integration now in small scale systems. In a small scale operation, nutrition and breeding are interdependent. Well-nourished animals are more likely to respond positively to selective breeding. Okay? If you have a sickly animal and you're trying to breed it, it's not going to catch. Simple as that. That's basically all it's saying. So the healthier the animal is, the more likely it is that it's going to produce healthier stock. And that's what you want. Okay? So breeding for desirable traits must be supported by a feeding program that meets those traits, leading traits, nutritional demands. All right? So going back up to the management that I spoke about previously. When you know you are breeding animals and you know that the animal is pregnant, those animals should be on a specific schedule and they should have a specific nutrient package or diet package specific to them. Okay? A pregnant animal's nutritional needs and a regular animal's nutritional needs are not the same. Same thing as human beings. Okay? So if you think about it, and a lot of people like, you serious? That is for animals too? I'm like, yes. So if you're thinking about it for you as a human being, most likely it's what an animal would need also. Okay? So a pregnant woman, human being, has to ensure that she has certain vitamins, minerals, nutrients within her diet, increased calories, etc. So similarly, this is what you're going to do for your animals. Okay? If you reduce, for example, if you have laying birds, okay, if you have layers and you reduce their feed and they're not getting the nutrition that they need, they're not going to lay eggs that are of quality. And if they do lay eggs, they are not going to produce large numbers. The numbers are going to be reduced. Okay? Some of them will actually stop producing all and not lay eggs at all. And you don't want that because you're feeding these animals for what? You're spending money on these animals for what if you're not getting back your input from what you put into them. Okay? Both practices should be a part of a broader animal husbandry system that includes weeding, meaning taking out underperformers. You don't want animals that are not performing regardless of how good the nutrition and the diet is. If they are not producing, take them out. Okay? Because that's a waste of your money. So if you have layers that are not laying eggs, that's next Sunday dinner. Might sound bad, but that's next Sunday dinner. Okay? If you have a pig and the pig has given you maybe 3 litters already and you register as the litters come, the litters are getting smaller. After the next litter, that's it for that pig. That's ham for Christmas. Okay? Don't keep animals around that are not producing, that are not giving you back exactly what you give them or more. Okay? Right? And then heating, which is daily care, and housing and hygiene. Okay? So all of those things have to be combined in order for you to be producing maximally, but the animals producing maximally as well. All right. So disease prevention and healthy livestock in small scale production. Maintaining healthy livestock in small scale production requires a proactive, integrated approach that combines biosecurity, parasite control, vaccination, and good management practices. Once again, we're coming back to management. Okay, so as you can see, regardless of what, management is a top key. You have to get that down pat. All right, so biosecurity and farm management. Biosecurity is the foundation of disease prevention for small-scale farms. This means quarantine new animals for at least 30 days before integration. Okay? Farm zoning, separate clean buffer and contaminated zones. What does this mean? Sometimes it means that you might have pregnant pigs in one area away from the general population. Okay? Piglets in one section away from the general population. And then just your regular pigs somewhere in between. Okay? Because all 3 groups would need 3 different sets of management practices And all of them are going to need proper hygiene practices to make sure that you don't have cross-contamination from pigs to human and human to pigs. Part of the problem that we are seeing now when we have diseases like H1N1, bird flu, and swine flu, and so on, those are diseases that are transmitted from livestock to people, is because of improper biosecurity practices. Okay. And unfortunately, we have seen in the past where whole flocks of birds, whole herds of pigs have to be put down because of a specific pathogen. Okay. And you don't want to lose your animals over one little slip up or one person not following something as simple as dipping their foot in a foot bath to go in and deal with your animals, etc. Okay, because that is a heavy loss. You don't want that. The next thing you're going to look at, so you have here disinfection is key, all right, and zoning areas, making sure that you disinfect your tools and your equipment, and limiting visitors. Okay, limit visitors. And then deworming. So strategic deworming. Remember when I was talking in management and I said you're supposed to have a deworming schedule and you're going to rotate your dewormers. So predominantly the two most popular dewormers that we have are paraquintal and ivermectin. Okay, so usually on a deworming protocol, we rotate them accordingly. Okay, because ivermectin is the strongest one. You don't want your parasites getting resistant to the strongest dewormer that you have out there. Okay, so you rotate it with stronger, slightly not so strong. Okay, so that they don't get used to it. And you don't deworm, how should I put it? You don't deworm based, yes, you deworm on schedule, but it's also suggested that before you deworm, you do what is called a fecal egg count. What is a fecal egg count? Basically, you go and collect some of the poop. Okay, you get some saline solution, you put it in. Okay, you get a little microscope, a little slide, you take out a sample, you put a little dot there, you put it down, you look through, and you're looking for eggs. And you're doing a count. Okay? Parasites, worms are natural. You're not going to have any livestock animal, when you look to the feces, you're not going to find any of them without worms in there, without some kind of parasite. But you're looking for a threshold. So when you're counting and you register, okay, it's below a threshold, the dewormer is working, great, awesome stuff. I don't really have to deworm right now. Okay? Even though it's on the schedule, I don't have to deworm right now. So next time around now, and the next time when you go and do a fecal float again and say, oh, this don't look good. There's too many worm eggs in this fecal float. Okay, time to deworm. And then based on what you dewormed the last time, you deworm with a different dewormer this time around. Okay? So all of those have to be included in your management practices. And then vaccinations. So in the Caribbean, right? These are the most predominant vaccines given to the animals. So for cattle, it is a vaccine for what we call BVD and clostridial diseases. These are diseases that are spread through the milk, and brucellosis. And brucellosis is kind of like a STD for cattle. Okay? For poultry, Newcastle disease and avian influenza are the most common vaccines given. And for goat and sheep, caprine arthritis and encephalitis, this causes a swelling of the joints. Okay? And Johne's disease, which causes a swelling of the jaw. Right? They almost look like they get lockjaw. Ectoparasite control. So once again, all of these in your management practices, part of your schedule, you have to have a vaccination schedule based on the animals that you have. Okay, and then ectoparasite control. So the external parasites, the lice, mites, ticks, they weaken immunity, cause stress, and some of them, like the ticks, amblyoma ticks, which is popular in the Caribbean, carries bacteria that causes heart water disease, or dermatitis, or derm we call it, where you see sores that pop up on the skin of the infected animals. Okay, so you have to have regular ectoparasite control, and there are various substances, ivermectin, injectable or pour-on, that is one of the most popular ones that are used for external ectoparasite control. Then nutrition and environmental health, right? Once again, just repeating the same thing over. Balanced meals, clean feed and water to support immune function, maintain dry and clean housing with good ventilation, and manage pasture rotation. Okay, and pasture rotation is also helpful with the control of the ectoparasites and the worms also. Okay, because you can minimize the buildup in a particular area just by rotating them. There are some areas where I have told farmers not to put their livestock because they were not rotating the animals, and so these areas or these pastures are now full of ticks. So if you walk through them, you walk out and you got ticks crawling up your feet. You don't want that. Okay, so to prevent saturation of parasites in a particular area, you rotate your animals accordingly. Then once again, management, monitoring, and record keeping, daily observation for signs of illness, and keep detailed health records of treatments. Okay, and emergency preparedness, have a plan for isolation of sick animals, contact tracing of affected animals, and coordination with your veterinary services. Okay, contact tracing is very important, especially if you are supplying meat to a food chain and there's an outbreak of something like E. coli or salmonella, and the tracing comes back to you. You need to know which animal, where, when, and where that possibly could have happened, so that you could mitigate any further influence or damage or contamination out into the public. All right, and we're on the last part, right? Sustainable livestock practices for food security and farm resilience. So, saying all of the things that I've said before, we kind of minimize it down or crunch it down into this little slide here. So, optimizing feed conversion, reducing waste, and minimizing land and water degradation are optimal for food security or livestock security and resilience. Smallholders can adapt by selecting climate adapted breeds, improving housing for heat stress mitigation, and diversifying feed sources. Strong local policies, extension services, and market access help small-scale farmers adopt and benefit from sustainable practices. In other words, harass your livestock extension officers. Okay? That's what they're there for. Right. And using locally available forages supplemented with digestibility, enhancing additives like certain oils, like coconut oil, soybean oil, and all these other things, can reduce methane emissions, especially in ruminant animals, sheep, goat, and cattle, and improve feed efficiency. And the reason that is added in there is because cow farms, specifically cow farms within United States, Canada, and Europe, they produce methane gas to the point where it actually affects our environment, such as carbon emissions, like carbon emissions. Okay, so that is why some people who are vegan or vegetarian say, oh, they're going to they don't believe in eating meat and so on because it's bad for the environment, because the cows and the sheep and the goat produce all this methane that goes into the environment and damages the ozone layer along with the carbon emissions. Okay, and then all of these things combine lower feed costs and support animal health. All righty then. So these are just some of the resources. I have sent this document to the coordinators. So if you want a hard copy of it, just ask them and they'll email it to you. And if you need my email address, they'll provide you with that, as well as other sources that I mentioned before, FAO, CADI, UNESCO, ICA, University of the West Indies, all of these on their websites have a ton load of resources for persons who are interested in livestock production and animal husbandry. So I hope I didn't bore you. It's a lot of information in a short period of time, but we can now have some questions if you have questions or concerns that you would like to be answered.
There are quite a few questions already open in the Q&A, but I have now opened the chat as well for people to put their questions in there.
Awesome. Hold on. Okay, so let's get to answering questions. All right, so Christine, the links are in the PowerPoint slide. So if you want, just request it and it will be sent to you so that you can find access to the links as well as the pages that I have just indicated to you. All right. What type of tagging? Okay, very good question. So tagging identification of animals is a big problem that we have in the region, where most legislation, agricultural legislation, indicates what type of tagging is acceptable. Okay, so we have the ear tags that you can buy online. Amazon or any other agricultural website would have ear tags that you would purchase, and they would have a series of codes and numbers. When you get the ear tags, they come with a tagger. So they come, you just put it on, you clamp it in the ear, boom, bam, bap, and it's out. Now, what you're supposed to do is register these numbers with your extension officer. Why? Because if your animal is stolen, or if it is hit by a car, or if it's attacked by a dog, or if it's found on private property or whatever it is, that tag can identify that it's your animal and that, you know, and then you move forward with whatever it is needs to be done when that animal is located. Okay? You don't just have to use the ear tags, you can do also ear notching. Okay, so that's another thing that you can do, and you can just Google it and you're going to see all kinds of ear maps come up with different types of notches that indicate different codes, different words, different numbers, and you can notch the ears like that. Preferably ear notching as well as ear tagging is done when the animals are babies. Okay, so when they've just been weaned off of the mother is when you would either do the tagging or the ear notching. But legally speaking, most agriculture departments require farm owners to have their animals have some kind of identifier. Is it done? No, unfortunately. Okay. Some persons get creative and they get dog collars and put it on around their necks to identify them. Tie cords and all kind of different ways to identify them, but those are not the approved identifiers for it's either ear notching or tags. Okay. All right. So it doesn't matter if it's plastic tags or metal tags. Some persons are old school, they actually go into branding. But persons are moving away from branding these days because it's time consuming, it's painful, it causes stress on the animal. And so we don't really do branding as much, but there's still a few old timers who believe in branding, so they do the branding themselves. Okay, next question. What type of fencing would you recommend for goats? I was planning to use bamboo as it's flexible, tall, and sustainable. That's a very good option, actually. And it's actually easy to repair. There's also, you can use bamboo. You can also use spruce if you have access to mountain where you can get those tree how should I say, tree limbs and so on, or mahogany or anything like that. If you have access to those strong types of trees that you can use, you can also use pallets. But if you are going to use pallets, I recommend you treating the pallets so that they not only are water resistant, but they're also pest resistant. Okay, so there are lots of sustainable ways, things that you can use for your fencing, but bamboo is of high quality, very durable, easy to repair, as well as other strong tree types, acacia, or what we call kusha. Even though it's prickly, if you can get those, they are very durable also. Okay. Okay, next question again. Dry season, we should keep the goats in pen. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes. So in dry season, we recommend that you keep your animals in for as long as possible, which means, unfortunately for you, you will have to go and bring feed for them. Okay? The further they roam during dry season, it also affects, it creates more stress on them because they're looking for food and water. Okay, so at least when you have them enclosed for a longer period of time, you know they're getting food and water. You know where they are. Okay, you can assess them for health to look and see if they're dehydrated, if they're suffering from heat stroke, etc. like that. So there are some farmers who now only limit the time. So instead of letting their animals out like 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning, and having them roam all day and then come back in at dusk, they will let them out now maybe just for a few hours in the afternoon, because the animals know that when the sun starts to set, that's their time to return. Okay, so the farmers would let them out from maybe like 3 o'clock, and by 6 o'clock or so on, they're already coming back. So you know they wouldn't have gone too far in that period of time, and they would come back, and you would have a better idea of their status in terms of health and so on. Yes, Pinterest. Pinterest, Google, when you want ideas for sustainable pens and creative ideas to reuse, reduce, and recycle so you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars building stuff, Google and Pinterest. Okay, so next question. How many goats are recommended per square foot in residential areas? This is dependent on the country that you're in. So for example, in St. Kitts and Nevis, it is 5. Okay, anything over 5, you better start to look for a piece of land somewhere to put those animals. All right, so that's why I said check with your agriculture department to verify, get the information, get all the correct information so that you don't do anything. Next thing you have somebody knocking on your door with a summons to say, oh, you have to move your animals from out of your yard. Okay? All right, I'm gonna try and get through as many questions as possible. Y'all throwing them at me very full speed. I am trying. Okay, so very good question. What type of layout would you recommend for a 40 by 24 foot raised pen? A section or free space layout? I always recommend a section, especially for the pregnant animals, to put them so they have a safe area when they're giving birth. Okay. The non-pregnant females and the males tend to be not so careful around the kids and could trample them. The males might get aggressive, right? So I usually recommend having an area where the pregnant females can go closer to when they're ready to drop, and have them separated from the rest of the flock. All right. Is it true when it's cold season, your chicken produce less eggs? No, it is true. It is true. And that is where the warming lamps come into place. Okay, so the warming lamps are used for two reasons. To ensure that the animals are comfortable and warm so that they don't cluster together and trample on each other in a cold snap, as well as keep the temperature regulated so that they can keep on producing the numbers that they would produce in warmer weather. Okay, so that's why the heat lamps are utilized within the chicken coops. So for two purposes. So yes, weather does put the temperature does affect production. So too hot, reduce production. Too cold, reduce production. Okay. So okay, so this is Janine. So I have a small fowl coop, 5 adult layer fowls, which I bought as adults with vitamins. Do I give them? And also, are they to be dewormed also, and how often? I am new to this. Don't worry about it. You're new to this, but you're true to it. Okay, right? So purchasing all the birds actually is actually kind of easier because they're already established. Okay? So once they are getting proper feed, you don't have to really supplement with the vitamins. However, I do recommend maybe supplementing with vitamins maybe once or twice a week or as needed. Okay? As needed would be as the temperature changes. When the place gets hotter and is more stress on their bodies, they're going to need more vitamins. Okay? And also, you can use ivermectin as a dewormer, and ivermectin can also be used to treat the lice and mites that tend to, harbor around your poultry birds. So you can use that. It's a dual purpose, a multi-purpose anti-parasitic, internal and external. Okay. Um, there's a shortage of eggs on the island. Can the feed be a course? Which island, Ruth? Because there's not a short. If it's in St. Kitts, yes, there's a shortage. If it's in Nevis, not a shortage. But it's not really, the shortage of eggs is more of a production issue with the farmers themselves as opposed to the birds that they have. There has been some difficulties in importing the birds recently, once again, because of the increased temperatures. Birds are brought in as chicks, and even though the temperature is regulated on the airplanes and so on, and there's an expected number of losses in transportation, unfortunately, there has been an increased number of shortages because of more deaths in transportation because of the heat. Okay, the chicks are not as resilient as the adult birds. Okay, how do I turn the poop into manure? I have hay in my pen. So basically, you're going to do what is called a manure compost. So you scoop up everything, the hay with the manure and everything mixed into it. You get some pellets, you make it up into like a box kind of situation, and you make a compost heap with that hay with the manure in it and let it break down, and then you can have that product at the end. Okay, so similar to what you do with composting. Rabbits kept for more than 4 years. Will that meat be fit for consumption? No. Okay, very good question. And this is a problem I have with persons who have animals that they're trying to sell for meat consumption. The ideal time for the best quality of meat in terms of ruminants and rabbits is anywhere from 8 months to a year and a half. Over 2 years, that meat is going to get hard. I'm not saying you can still consume it. It's just that when you are cooking it, it's going to take a longer time to cook. Okay, so it is recommended that if you're going to be using animals for meat, regardless of the breed, excluding poultry birds, because that's a whole different section by itself. The birds are different. We are doing them by weight as opposed to age, right? So all other animals, anywhere between 8 months to a year and a half, it is suggested that if you are going to produce them for meat purposes, that is the range in which you slaughter them to get the best meat quality. All right, so is it a good practice to incorporate molasses in your goat feed? Yes, it's called silage. Okay. And there's a recipe for it. You could Google it. It's very simple. So what you're going to do is get your trash from the farm, from the crop farmer or the grass or whatever it is, and you're going to chop it up as finely as possible as you can. Some persons actually use a lawnmower to break it up into smaller pieces or have chippers that they could feed it into. And you get the small pieces, and then you're going to mix a proportion of water and molasses, and you're going to store it in an airtight container for about a week to 2 weeks. It needs to ferment. And then what you're going to do is that you're going to incorporate that silage into your regular green feed. So whether it be your wild tamarind or your other trash and whatever it is, and you feed them that. That's going to provide minerals and energy for your goats. Okay, so the best feed to give pigs when they are piglets is their mother's milk. And then when they're weaned, you wean them on a combination of organic material, such as vegetable cuttings, and you can mix these in with the grain. Now, you don't want to overfeed your animals with too much grain because it causes two problems. It causes a disease called bloat, which is where their stomachs bloat up. And this, by extension, causes something called acidosis in the blood, and it can cause lung organ damage and organ failure, as well as cause a rupture of the stomach, and the animal can just collapse on you just like that. The second thing that it does is that it causes the animal to gain more fat than meat mass. Okay, so you have to be wary of that when you're doing that. Okay. Is there any way where people learn how to slaughter animals very humanely and also learn to butcher properly? Okay. Most abattoirs that I know of, the supervisors don't mind having farmers come and learn how to slaughter animals. The way that the sheep, goat, and cattle predominantly are slaughtered is by taking what is called a stun gun and putting it to the skull and shooting it. It knocks them unconscious, and then they're hoisted up upside down, and then the process begins. There's no humanity in slaughtering, unfortunately, because there's slicing, dicing, and all kind of other stuff. But you don't want the animal to be conscious or alive. So you have to, the humane part about it is knocking them out before you actually slaughter them. Similarly with pigs. Okay. And so if you have a contact with your agriculture extension officer, and that's a concern or skill that you want to learn, you could tell them, hey, you think you all could organize a workshop where we could learn how to slaughter and butcher properly or whatever it is. A good extension officer will try their best to make it happen. An abattoir supervisor should not have an issue with that happening at all. Okay. Let's see. Let's go over here into the chat section. There was some other questions over here. Let's see. I'm trying to. Okay. So what guidance on water tap versus rainwater is best for hydrating livestock? Okay. So it comes down to electrolytes. Okay, it comes down to electrolytes. And if you are going to be using rainwater predominantly, then it's recommended that you get some kind of salt block or salt lick for the animals to have access. So because salt is an electrolyte, so you can either have the salt block or the salt lick, or there's actually additives that you can purchase in any livestock store or supply office that you can add to the water, and it will enhance it in terms of the electrolytes. And it doesn't matter if it's tap or rainwater, but if you're going to predominantly use rainwater, then yes, because it's so pure and it has minimal electrolytes in there, so you're going to have to add it into the water source for them. Okay, either a salt block, salt lick, or an additive into the water. Will Lucona plant be a good? Yes, Lucona is a very good legume. Okay, and just like us, these animals, regardless of the animals, they need a good balance of proteins, fiber, and energy supplements as well as hydration. So incorporating legumes like lucona and wild tamarind and trash and so on it will help enhance the meat quality. Okay, just like how they tell us women that, you know, as you're getting older, you got to eat more protein to keep your muscle and everything else. Same thing for the animals. All right. What else? Trying to find some more questions to answer. We are at the 8 o'clock mark. Okay, somebody asked, how many pigs can I keep in my backyard in Nevis? 2. Anything over 2, you need to find a pen somewhere on a piece of land, unfortunately. Only 2. And we know that pigs have large litters. So if you're going into pig farming, especially, I have more complaints from neighbors in neighborhoods about pigs and chickens. Pigs because of the smell and chickens because of the noise. Okay, so just bear that in mind if you're planning to do anything in your neighborhood, in your yard, based on the space you have and the type of neighbors you have. Okay, some neighbors don't care and others will be very disgusting. Okay, like I said, you might just be there and you see an extension officer come knocking on your door and telling you, you know, you got to move your animals. All right. Okay, so I think that's it for now. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to all the questions, but thank you guys for having me. My apologies for any background noises that you hear. I do pet sitting. And so I have a full house and the donkeys are passing outside. And so whenever a donkey passes, because it's dry and they're looking for water, the dogs get excited. Um, Oh, let me answer this question really quick from Roxanne in St. Lucia. She's asking about cross-border livestock purchases and what specific guidance or protocol. Okay, so every island has different import protocols for the island animals that they're importing. Okay, so it's important that you check with your chief veterinary officer for the documentation that would tell you specifically what you need to do and have in place before you can import the animal into the island. Okay, inter-island or cross-border purchases are extremely common. That's how we share so many similar breeds and so on. So once you get that confirmation and there's a document for each species because there are different requirements for each species. So depending on what you want to bring in, you go to your chief veterinary officer first at tell them you're interested in bringing in such and such an animal from whatever island or whatever, and they're going to give you a document and say, okay, ensure that the animal has these vaccines, has this tested and so on. Make sure this comes back positive or this comes back negative. And once we get all of these things, you get your approval, you pay your fee, and then you bring in the animals accordingly. When you bring them in, the chief vet will do an inspection. They'll have to be quarantined for a period of time. And after that, you should be good to go. Okay. Okay, so yes. I'm sorry to anybody else that I didn't get to answer your question. But once again, thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure as always.
Thank you so
Like I said,
much.
if you guys need my contact to ask questions and to get guidance, you can get my email address from the coordinators, and looking forward to seeing some female animals owners soon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Louisy. This was a fantastic program. I was locked in the whole time. So thank you so much for being here. And yeah, we'll be sure to send out your contact in our Ag-Cademy group so that if anybody has any other questions, they can contact you directly. Thanks so much for the
Yes.
program tonight. And for everybody else, thank you again for being here. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to welcoming you back next Tuesday for the next Ag-Cademy session on Introduction to Greenhouses. That's next Tuesday. And for those of you that were here on last Tuesday that still had questions, for our speaker, uh, he'll be available on Wednesday. Mr. Polius will be available on Wednesday of next week for an optional session for you guys to ask any additional questions of him as well. So we'll see you on Tuesday for our mandatory session, and then Wednesday is the optional session with Mr. Polius from last Tuesday's session. So thank you so much, Dr. Louisy, and have a great night, everybody.
Bye.